Hello Golden State Warriors fans. We are here once again to bring you the latest news related to our team, and I would like to emphasize how committed we are to improving our performance to achieve great results. Before we dive into this intriguing news, I kindly request you to show your support by clicking the like button, and if you are not yet subscribed to our channel, I invite you all to join us on an exciting journey. Remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss anything.
The Warriors may have just been handed a rare chance to build a truly intimidating front-court partnership next to Draymond Green. Right now, Michael Porter Jr. is the name most commonly linked to Golden State. But with the February 5 trade deadline approaching, there's another interior option the Warriors could have to seriously weigh. Memphis Grizzlies big man Jiren Jackson Jr. might not offer the same shooting reputation as Porter, but what he brings defensively could be even more valuable for this roster. His skill set has the potential to form a more feared paint duo alongside Green, one built on size, rim protection, and versatility. Why the Warriors should at least explore Jiren Jackson Jr. Jackson's future in Memphis is back in the conversation, even after he signed a 5-year max extension this offseason. NBA reporter Kelly Iko of Yahoo Sports reported that the 26-year-old could become the next major piece to move, depending on what happens with Ja Morant's situation in Memphis. Talking to executives from rival teams, there's a growing sense that Jackson, despite being a stark contrast to Morant, and despite Memphis's insistence on having him as a key piece for the team's future, could be the next piece to fall at some point should a Morant trade come to fruition. Eco wrote. From Golden State's perspective, Jackson checks a lot of boxes because of how much he could raise the team's ceiling on both ends of the floor. He was named Defensive Player of the Year in 2023. He made the All-NBA second team last season, and he's been an All-Star in each of the last 2 years. There's been one lingering question over time. Jackson hasn't consistently played as a true center effectively year after year. But the idea here is simple. Playing next to Draymond Green might help solve that. At 6'10", Jackson would immediately give the Warriors more size while creating a formidable defensive pairing with Green in the paint. And offensively, his ability to space the floor would fit cleanly with a front court that also includes Jimmy Butler. The shooting numbers support the argument. Jackson is hitting 36.1% from 3 this season on 4.6 attempts per game. Last season, he shot 37.5% on 5.3 attempts. He's averaging 18.5 points this season, and he averaged over 22 points in each of the last 2 years. So the basketball case is real. But the business side is where the decision gets complicated. The contract factor that could change everything. The biggest difference with Jackson is his contract, and it's the kind of number that can scare teams off. He's making $35 million this season, which makes salary matching realistic. The larger issue is what comes after that. 4 years and $205 million remaining. And as it stands, that long-term money doesn't look particularly attractive for Golden State or for other potential suitors. That's where the comparison to Porter becomes clear. Porter only has 1 additional year left on his deal, which would allow the Warriors to protect their cap flexibility heading into the 2027 offseason. So even if Porter remains Golden State's top target among available players, Jackson still deserves real consideration, especially if the franchise is serious about maximizing Stephen Curry's chances to win a 5th championship. And that real consideration isn't just a casual suggestion. It's a reminder that Golden State could be looking at 2 very different paths, even if both routes are connected to the same goal: upgrade the roster around Stephen Curry. On one side, you have the name that's been talked about the most: Michael Porter Jr., the cleaner contract timeline, and the appeal of preserving flexibility into the 2027 offseason. On the other, you have the less discussed option that could change the Warriors' identity in the paint: Jiren Jackson Jr., the defensive edge, the size, and the possibility of building something truly imposing next to Draymond Green. The contrast is sharp because the strengths are different. Porter represents a more obvious offensive fit, especially as the more popular name linked to Golden State. Jackson represents the chance to build a front-court duo that opponents would feel every night, and the piece makes it clear why Jackson stays on the table. He isn't just a defender with a reputation. He has awards and recent resume to back it up. Defensive Player of the Year in 2023, All-NBA second team last season, All-Star in each of the last 2 years. That type of profile is why his name sparks debate, even with the uncertainties around his center minutes historically, because the upside isn't hypothetical. It's already been proven at a high level. And then there's the spacing element that keeps the idea from being purely defensive. The article points directly to his three-point percentages and attempt volume across 2 seasons. That matters because it suggests he can contribute offensively without crowding the floor. In other words, the Warriors wouldn't be trading for a non-shooter and hoping it works. The numbers show he can stretch a defense. That's also where the fit next to Greenpoint becomes more than a nice thought. If the concern is Jackson's ability to play center consistently and effectively over the years, pairing him with Draymond is framed as a potential answer. Not guaranteed, but plausible within the logic of roles and responsibilities. And it's not just Green in that frontcourt picture. The article also mentions Jimmy Butler in the paint mix, which makes the spacing note even more important. If you're going to build a bigger, tougher interior, you still need room to operate. But every big basketball argument in this piece runs into the same wall. The contract. Yes, Jackson's $35 million salary this season makes matching money possible. That's the part that keeps the idea alive. But the 4 years and $205 million remaining is the weight that changes the conversation from interesting to serious risk. Because long-term money doesn't just affect one trade, it affects future planning. It affects how much flexibility you keep. It affects how quickly you can pivot if something doesn't fit. And the article is blunt about the perception of that deal. It doesn't look particularly attractive for Golden State or other potential suitors. That's not about the player's talent. That's about the commitment. Which brings the comparison back to Porter in a more practical way. Porter, having just 1 year left after this one, is portrayed as the clean advantage. It keeps the Warriors from locking themselves into a massive long-term obligation while still giving them a chance to add talent now. So if Golden State is thinking strategically, it's not only choosing between players, it's choosing between timelines, a shorter-term bet that preserves future space, versus a longer-term investment that could reshape the roster's financial structure. And that's the ripple effect fans should really focus on. Because whichever direction the Warriors lean, it changes what building around Curry looks like. One path emphasizes flexibility and future maneuvering. The other emphasizes immediate frontcourt strength, size, and a potentially dominant defensive pairing. That's why Jackson being worth considering isn't a throw-in line. It's the signal that even if Porter remains the headline target, the Warriors may still be monitoring any real movement around Jackson's situation in Memphis, especially given that the report frames him as someone who could become available depending on what happens with Morant. So the takeaway is simple. This isn't just a debate about who's better. It's a debate about what Golden State values most right now. A cleaner contract route that keeps options open, or a bigger swing that could transform the paint next to Draymond Green. And if the franchise truly wants to maximize Stephen Curry's chances at a 5th title, the article's point is that they can't afford to ignore either conversation. Draymond Green just poured gasoline on the Warriors' trade buzz, and he didn't exactly try to hide it. Michael Porter Jr. remains a major name tied to Golden State in potential trade talks, and Green strongly hinted that something could be coming soon involving the Brooklyn Nets wing. Green publicly backed Porter by calling him the player who took the leap in December. But it wasn't the praise that grabbed Warriors fans. It was what he said next. Draymond Green hints at a Michael Porter Jr. trade. On his podcast, Green said he expects the Nets to take advantage of Porter's rising value by moving him for draft picks before the trade deadline. When you have a team like this that's looking to rebuild, and you find someone like Michael Porter Jr., usually they trade him for draft picks, Green said. From Golden State's perspective, though, the most intriguing part was the timeline Green casually dropped right after that. We'll see what they do with that in the next 9 days, Green said. That line immediately raised eyebrows. Why 9 days if the trade deadline is still weeks away? The simplest explanation is that Green recorded the episode recently, meaning those 9 days point directly to January 15th, when Jonathan Kuminga becomes eligible to be traded. That date matters because it's the first possible window for the Warriors to pull off a major move. And even if they can't officially complete a deal until then, it doesn't stop them from starting conversations earlier and having something ready to finalize once the date arrives. Why Porter is such a big target? In his first season with the Nets, Porter has emerged as a strong all-star candidate. He's averaging 26.1 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 3.3 assists, each one a career high, while shooting 49.5% from the field and 41.1% from three. At 27 years old, Porter looks like exactly the kind of talent the Warriors could use next to Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler. The idea is simple. He gives Golden State a real weapon to help elevate what is currently the 19th-ranked offense in the league. The price tag won't be small. If Golden State truly wants Porter, the cost will be steep. The Warriors have historically been cautious about giving up future draft picks, but Porter is expected to command a serious return, likely 2 first-round picks. And then there's the money. Porter's $38.2 million salary would almost certainly require the Warriors to send out contracts such as Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Buddy Hield to make the numbers work. Why a third team might be necessary? There's another complication the report highlights. Brooklyn hasn't shown interest in Kuminga. The Nets didn't want him during the preseason, and it doesn't appear they want him now either. That makes the deal harder to structure and could mean a third team may need to get involved. One example mentioned is the Sacramento Kings, who are said to be keeping an eye on Kuminga. The big takeaway. Whether Green's comments end up meaning something or nothing, they've done one thing for sure. They've turned January 15th into a date Warriors fans can't ignore. And they've only added more fuel to the idea that Golden State could be gearing up for real trade action before the deadline arrives. And that's what makes this moment feel different. It's not just that Michael Porter Jr. is being linked to the Warriors again. It's that a core veteran like Draymond Green is openly talking in timelines, not just talent. Because when a player says, "We'll see what they do with that in the next 9 days," it instantly changes the temperature of the conversation. It makes the rumor cycle feel less theoretical and more calendar-driven. And the calendar point the report lays out is clear. January 15th isn't the trade deadline. It's the first day Jonathan Kuminga becomes eligible to be moved. So even if nothing happens immediately, that date becomes the start of a new phase for Golden State. It's the first time the Warriors can realistically turn big-name discussions into an actual deal. And that shift alone has repercussions. It adds pressure to every report, every podcast clip, every front office whisper, because when finally matches the who. When you can finally trade a major salary piece, the league starts viewing you as a real player in the market. Now look at why Porter is being treated like a serious target in the first place. The numbers in the report paint him as more than just a good scorer. A 27-year-old putting up 26.1 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 3.3 assists, career highs, while shooting 49.5% from the field and 41.1% from three is the profile of someone whose value is hard to ignore. That's why he's described as a strong all-star candidate, and it's why a rebuilding team, as Green framed it, would see a chance to cash out for picks while his value is elevated. But from the Warriors' side, it's about fit. The report frames Porter as exactly the type of talent and skill set that could complement Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler. Not as a luxury, but as a solution to a very specific need. Boosting what is currently the 19th-ranked offense in the league. That's the practical basketball argument. The roster needs more offensive punch, and Porter's efficiency from three is part of why the idea feels so clean. Still, the repercussions show up immediately when you talk cost. The report notes Golden State has historically been cautious about sacrificing future draft picks. So if Porter likely costs 2 first-rounders, it's not just a transaction, It's a philosophical decision. It's a choice about how aggressive the Warriors are willing to be right now, and whether they're willing to trade future flexibility for immediate impact around Curry. Then the salary matching makes it even more real. Porter's $38.2 million salary isn't something you slide into easily. The report points to Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Buddy Hield as contracts that would almost certainly be needed to make the money work. And that's where the human side of this hits. This wouldn't just be adding Porter. It would mean moving multiple rotation-level pieces and reshaping the depth chart around Curry and Butler. Which brings us to the most complicated part of the report. Brooklyn hasn't shown interest in Kuminga. Not in the preseason, and apparently not now. So even if Golden State is willing to include him, that doesn't automatically get the deal done. It changes the structure, and it increases the chances that a third team becomes necessary. That's why the Sacramento Kings are mentioned as an example, because they're said to be watching Kuminga. And once a third team enters the picture, everything becomes more delicate. More teams means more negotiations. More negotiations means more ways for deals to stall, pivot, or evolve into something different. But it also means there could be more pathways to make a trade work, even if the direct fit between Brooklyn and Golden State isn't clean. So whether you see Draymond's comments as intentional or not, the effect is the same. They sharpened the timeline. They raised the stakes. And they pulled January 15th into the center of the Warriors' news cycle as the first real door that opens. Because after that, the Warriors aren't just a team with rumors attached. They become a team with the ability to act on those rumors. And that's exactly why the anticipation grows from here. Moses Moody may have just made the Warriors' path to a Michael Porter Jr. trade a whole lot clearer. And it starts with a simple point. His performance against the Trail Blazers was a reminder that he still has real value. Golden State is increasingly being linked to Brooklyn Nets forward Michael Porter Jr. as their top trade target. And it's easy to see why. Porter is having the best season of his career in Brooklyn, averaging 25.9 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 3.4 assists. He's also knocking down 40.4% of his three-point shots. No matter what financial restrictions exist, Porter looks like the kind of piece that could help fix a major part of what's been holding the Warriors back offensively. But here's the problem. The trade package still isn't clean. The Nets reportedly have little interest in Jonathan Kuminga, which makes it harder to build a straightforward deal. And that's where Moses Moody starts to matter in a much bigger way. In Golden State's dominant win over Portland, Moody put up 14 points, grabbed 2 rebounds, and handed out 3 assists. He also hit 4 of 8 from 3. That's not just a nice stat line. That's the kind of performance that changes how teams evaluate you in real time. If the Warriors are serious about Porter, any realistic package would need to include Moody. And if he strings together more strong outings over the next few weeks, it could help turn a messy trade idea into something much more workable. Why Moody could be the swing piece draft capital will always be a major part of any deal for Porter. But the article makes it clear. Moody matters too. The Warriors are once again positioned to make a major move at the trade deadline. Right now, they rank 15th in the league in offense, and their championship hopes depend on adding another player who can consistently put points on the board. Porter is the most obvious name for that job, but his contract, roughly $38 million this season, creates a hard reality. Golden State would need to stack multiple salaries to make a trade work, and the clearest route to reaching that number runs through Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, and Moses Moody. Kuminga and Hield have recently received multiple DNPs, and because of that, the report suggests their market value likely isn't strong enough to convince Brooklyn to move its top player. It gets even more complicated in a hypothetical Porter deal. Kuminga would likely need to be routed to a third team. That leaves Hield and Moody as the main pieces the Nets would actually be receiving back, and that's why Moody's value becomes so important. Even if Golden State is willing to include future first-round picks, which may ultimately be the deciding factor, Brooklyn still needs more than just picks to feel good about the move. The article notes that the Nets see themselves as potentially competitive in the next few seasons, so they need players who can retain value after the trade is done. That's where Moody's performance against Portland becomes more than a one-night story. Games like that are a reminder of what he can be, a valuable 3-and-D wing who can contribute as a starter or off the bench. And if he keeps playing at that level during this stretch, it doesn't just help the Warriors win now. It makes the road to a Michael Porter Jr. trade feel far more realistic and far more clear. Because from Brooklyn's side, this isn't just about moving money or collecting picks. It's about trust. If the Nets truly view themselves as a team that can be competitive in the next few seasons, then any deal has to bring back value they can rely on after the transaction is complete. Draft capital matters, yes, but players matter too, especially if they can actually play and hold their value. And that's exactly why Moody's recent reminder against Portland carries weight. 4 made threes on 8 attempts isn't just efficient. It's a clean signal of the role he's supposed to fill. A wing who can space the floor. A wing who can defend. A wing who can contribute whether he starts or comes off the bench. That's the profile the article is pointing to when it calls him a valuable 3-and-D piece. And it's the type of profile that helps negotiations feel less like a gamble. It also puts pressure on the next few weeks. The report isn't saying one game seals anything, it's saying the trend is what matters. If Moody strings together multiple strong performances, the Warriors aren't just showcasing him. They're strengthening the most realistic part of a Porter package. Because the piece makes one thing very clear. A trade for Porter doesn't work cleanly without Moody involved. And that's where the repercussions hit Golden State internally, too. Moody's role has been uncertain long-term, according to the article, so every good game raises an unavoidable question for the Warriors. Is he part of the future core? Or is he the best asset they have to help land the type of scorer they believe they need? The answer shapes everything. Golden State's offense is sitting 15th in the league, and the report frames their title hopes as tied to adding another scorer. So if the front office truly believes that, the urgency increases. Porter becomes the obvious choice because of his production, and because his three-point efficiency is strong enough to fit into what the Warriors want to be offensively. But you can't get a player like that without giving something real back. That's why the article keeps circling back to two things: salary matching and value. Porter's contract is around $38 million this season, so the Warriors have to bundle contracts. The only true path, as the piece puts it, runs through Kuminga, Hield, and Moody. Yet the report also explains why that's still not simple. Kuminga and Hield have been receiving DNPs, and that likely hurts how other teams value them right now. So if Brooklyn isn't convinced by those two, the negotiation becomes less about quantity and more about quality. And quality is where Moody steps forward. If Kuminga has to be moved to a third team in a hypothetical deal, then Brooklyn's direct return leans heavily toward Hield and Moody, plus whatever draft compensation is attached. That structure makes Moody's perceived value even more central, because the Nets would need to believe he won't just look good in a small sample. They'd need confidence that he can hold value after the deal, and that's exactly what the article emphasizes. So for Moody, the stakes are unusually clear. Every strong shooting night makes him more convincing as a player who can help a competitive team. Every solid two-way performance makes him less like filler and more like a real piece. And for the Warriors, that clarity could be the difference between a trade concept and a trade that's actually actionable. This is why the Portland performance matters beyond the box score. It's a reminder to the league that Moody can step into his 3-and-D identity and produce. And if he continues to do it through this next stretch of games, the Warriors aren't just improving their chances on the court. They're making the path to their biggest trade target feel exponentially more straightforward. The Warriors' name always shows up in trade chatter because this is a franchise that isn't afraid to make moves. But not every fit is actually a fit. And according to this argument, one target has become completely toxic for Golden State: Herb Jones. Jones has been loosely connected to the Warriors for years in rumors. But the point here is simple. Trading for him now would be a disaster, and it's the kind of mistake you avoid at all costs. Part of the problem is how the Pelicans are covered nationally. When New Orleans pops up in headlines, it's usually for one of two reasons: something notable involving Zion Williamson, often a dunk or an injury, or another reminder of how untouchable the Pelicans supposedly view their roster. Even with the team struggling, the perception is that New Orleans treats many of its players like stars, and that inflated price tag is exactly what makes a Herb Jones deal so risky. On paper, you can see why people talk themselves into it. Jones is a 6'7" forward who has been viewed as one of the league's better defenders since entering the NBA in 2021. He was a steal as the 35th pick, became a starter early in his rookie season, and has played in every game since then. Combine that durability with the Pelicans' asking price, and the average fan is naturally going to assume he must be elite. But the reality, as laid out here, is more complicated. Yes, Jones is still a solid defender. He can take on the opponent's top wing threat and hold his own in one-on-one matchups. The problem is that he's no longer the same game-changing defensive force he once looked like, especially with his block rate dropping sharply over the last 2 seasons. Man-to-man defense? Still there. That guided missile defensive roaming that swings possessions? That part of the game has faded, and it's not clear it's coming back. Age is a factor in this evaluation, too. Jones is already 27, and he entered the league at 23. Defense is a young player's game. That doesn't mean he can't still be impactful, but the point is that his performance has clearly declined. And the real reason this matters is what's happened offensively. His offense started out shaky, and according to this assessment, it has completely collapsed over the past 2 years. To understand how dramatic the shift is, look at the contrast. In 2023-24, Jones shot 41.8% from 3 and 56.8% from 2. That was on a Pelicans team that won 49 games and made the playoffs. At that time, he looked like he had taken a major step forward. He wasn't just a defender. He looked like one of the most valuable supporting players in basketball because he could defend and contribute points. But since then, it's fallen apart. This season, he's shooting a below-average 33.3% from 3. Even more alarming, he's at an inexplicably poor 44.9% on 2-point shots. And the comparison here is blunt. Among players 6'7" or taller, the only ones with efficiency that bad this season are bench players, rookies, shooting specialists, or Brook Lopez, who is jokingly framed as possibly a shooting specialist at this point. And players in that category don't justify a massive trade price, especially not multiple first-round picks. It gets worse when you factor in availability. The argument points out that upgrades would be needed to guarantee getting Jones, and that's especially concerning considering he's been dealing with injuries for a second straight season. So the end result, in this view, is a player who is aging, fragile, trending downward, and currently one of the worst offensive players in the league. And that leads to the obvious question: why would the Warriors want that? The appeal is the idea of Herb Jones, not the current version. The idea is an elite 3-and-D player, someone who would elevate the defense to another level, hit threes well enough to keep defenses honest, and occasionally attack the rim thanks to the spacing created by playing next to Wardell Stephen Curry, too. But the reality described here is the opposite. The claim is that Jones and Draymond Green would be an awkward pairing, not complementary, conflicting. Instead of helping Curry, Jones would further shrink the floor. He would clog spacing even more, and his defense isn't dominant enough anymore to make up for how damaging his offensive limitations would be. In this framing, Jones shouldn't be treated like a premium starter. He should be a specialist off the bench. That's why the conclusion is so direct. The Warriors should stay far away from Herb Jones on the trade market. There are other players who can help Golden State without demanding that kind of price, and Jones, according to this argument, is no longer that player, and that's the part Warriors fans can't afford to ignore. A trade doesn't just bring in a name, it brings in a version of that player, right now, in this moment, with the strengths and weaknesses they're currently showing. The argument here is that Herb Jones is being sold as an idea that no longer matches the reality. The idea is simple: an elite 3-and-D wing who locks up top scorers, hits open threes, and thrives next to Stephen Curry because Curry's gravity creates clean looks. But the reality, as laid out, is that the three isn't automatic anymore. And the offense hasn't just dipped, it's cratered. That's why the two-point percentage is such a red flag in this piece. A 44.9% mark on twos for a player his size isn't framed as a normal slump. It's framed as the kind of efficiency you typically see from very specific types of players, bench pieces, rookies, or niche specialists. And if that's where his offense currently sits, the trade value math breaks. Because you're not just paying for defense in the abstract. You're paying for defense that's supposed to come with enough offense to stay playable in big moments. The article's claim is that Jones is no longer that guy. Yes, he can still hold his own in isolation defense. But the roaming missile element that swings possessions, blocks, sudden disruptions, chaos creation, has declined with that sharp drop in block rate over the last 2 seasons. So now you're left with a player who is good defensively, not game-defining. And if that's the case, the offensive shortcomings become harder to carry. That's where the fit with Draymond Green becomes the breaking point. Golden State already runs lineups where spacing is precious. The piece argues that putting Jones next to Draymond would create an offensive partnership that fights itself. Instead of opening the floor for Curry, it would squeeze it. Instead of helping the offense breathe, it would suffocate the space Curry needs to operate. And that's a huge repercussion, because Curry isn't just another scorer in this system. He's the entire engine. Any move that makes his job harder has to come with a very clear payoff. The claim here is that Jones's defense is no longer dominant enough to offset what he takes away offensively. So you end up paying a premium price for a player who doesn't actually swing games for you. And the price is the part that really makes this radioactive, according to the piece. New Orleans' reputation, as described here, is that they treat their roster like it's untouchable. Even while being one of the worst teams in the sport, they're portrayed as setting asking prices that assume every player is a star. So if you combine that high asking price with what this article calls an aged, fragile, declining player, you get the worst kind of trade risk. It's the trade where you lose assets and still don't fix the problem. And there's also the durability concern the piece highlights. Jones has been dealing with injuries for a second straight season. So you're not just trading for production, you're trading for uncertainty. That uncertainty matters even more when the player's offensive performance is already described as collapsing. Because if the shot isn't there and the availability isn't there, you can't even justify the gamble. This is why the conclusion doesn't hedge. It doesn't say, be careful. It says, stay away. Because the Warriors can't afford to overpay for a player who, in this argument, should be a bench specialist at this stage, not a high-level, extremely valuable starter. And the final repercussion is what it implies about Golden State's broader approach. If the Warriors are going to spend real assets, especially multiple first-round picks, as the piece references in this context, they need a player who clearly raises their ceiling, not someone whose best-case reputation is ahead of what he currently is. That's the warning. Don't buy the story. Buy the reality. And according to this evaluation, the reality says the Warriors should keep their distance and look elsewhere for help that doesn't cost so much.